There we go. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining our event tonight. Still in a virtual setting, which is great because it feels like we are all together, even though we're spread out throughout North America and Eastern Canada. So thanks everybody for joining today. We have our ribeye grilling event. I'm going to go through just a few housekeeping rules. If you guys are comfortable doing so, I know we're very Zoom fatigued out, but if you guys are comfortable doing so, I encourage you guys to put your cameras on so that we can feel like we're in the same room together. We also want you guys to be able to ask questions. So raise your hand, come off mute. Everybody has that ability to mute or unmute themselves. So if you guys have any questions, just take yourselves off mute, ask directly. But I will also be monitoring the Q&A at the bottom or the chat function as well. So feel free to get started by putting maybe who you're from, maybe what company you're with, maybe where you sit. And then I see that in there. So Michael said hello from Colorado. So let's just try to get a little bit of our chat going, a small introduction to each other. Today, we're going to be going through a cooking demonstration of the ribeye steaks. I know that all of you are anxiously awaiting your shipments. We did have a little bit of a delay due to the high volume of registrations that we had for this particular event. So please be patient, hang tight, and your steaks will be arriving by the end of the week, as well as your rubs. It will all be inside of one specific package for you guys. If you have any questions, or if we get to Friday and you have not received your shipment, then please feel free to reach out to me directly. But as long as you get them by Friday, we should be in good shape. With that being said, we will send the recording out after this so that you guys can follow along again once you get that shipment and be able to make those steaks at home for you, family, friends, loved ones, whatever it might be. I think that is it for the most part. Thank you guys for kind of mentioning who you are, where you're from in the chat. And without further ado, I would love to introduce Mike Steele, four-time Louisiana barbecue steak champion. He is the owner of Barbecue Champs Academy, and he is a wealth of knowledge for both grilling and ribeye steaks. So Mike, over to you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on again. It's always a great honor to be able to do these classes for everyone. And I hope you take a little bit away from it today. We're going to be cooking up some amazing ribeye steaks. Like Danielle said, my name is Mike Steele. I am the pitmaster of the Pigs and Cows Gone Wild competition barbecue team out of Shreveport, Louisiana. I am actually now it's 5-time Louisiana champion. Yes, I just won it again at the end of June. So it's 4 straight years that I've won it. And so, yeah, I have a lot of fun grilling and barbecuing. We compete a lot in Louisiana and Texas. And so the name of my team is Pigs and Cows Gone Wild. And also, I am the founder of Barbecue Champs Academy. It's the world's first online tell-all barbecue cooking school that is taught by world champion barbecue pitmasters and world champion steak grill masters. And I've picked up a thing or two from some of these world champs that cook steaks. And I'm going to share a lot of that knowledge with you today. So without further ado, we're going to just dive right in over here on the cutting board and let you take a look at what we'll be grilling up today. Man, that is a beauty right there. I'm going to talk a little bit about different ribeye steaks. All ribeye steaks are not the same. And one of the things that I absolutely love to do is get people involved in this class. We got a lot of people that's in attendance today. I think Danielle said it was over 200, which is awesome. So I want to hear some questions if you have them. If you don't quite understand my answer to anything, please feel free to unmute yourself, and I'll answer your question as best I can. Usually I haven't been tricked up on one yet. Hopefully I don't get tricked up on one today. So we're going to talk a little bit about steak selection, and I'm going to talk about 2 different type of ribeye steaks. There's one in particular that I absolutely love, and there's one that is my second choice, and usually it's the only one that you're going to get. So today we're going to be cooking some prime ribeye steaks, and these are a boneless steak, which I usually prefer the boneless steak. You know, a lot of times they'll have the bone on it. People ask me a lot of times, well, don't that add flavor? Well, not really, because this steak's going to cook in a matter of about 6 minutes. It'll be done. And there's really not a lot of flavor that's going to get imparted into that ribeye steak in 6 minutes. So these are a boneless ribeye steak. That's what I prefer to cook. I don't want to be paying extra money for a bone. So today we're going to talk about 2 things. Number one, we're going to talk about the selection or the grade of meat. These are prime ribeye steaks, and there's three different steaks that usually you'll see in the store. There's a select, there is a choice, and there's a prime. And the grading of the meat is how much fat, how much marbling, intramuscular marbling that you see inside the meat itself. Not external fat, but internal fat, these little serrations that you see throughout the steak. That's what you're looking for. If you have a select steak, it's pretty much well going to be like this little area right here. It's just going to be all red. Not a good steak. I never would ever recommend anybody buy a select. The one up from that would be a choice. And this to me is supposed to be a prime, but this is kind of what a choice steak will look like. You'll start to see little fat serrations throughout it. Then you get into a prime. This one is a lot better. It's going to have even more fat serrations throughout the meat. This is really important, and there's three key things that really benefits a ribeye steak when it has this intramuscular fat throughout the meat. Three different things. Does anybody want to take a guess at what three of the things are that will benefit a steak by having a lot of fat and a lot of marbling throughout the meat? And if you have an answer, go ahead and unmute yourself. There's no wrong answer. I mean, if it's something that's off the wall, I'll tell you, but if you have an idea of what it may be, then let's hear it.
In the chat, we have flavor, moisture, and taste.
Okay, very, very good. Yes, flavor is the first thing. It's juiciness, moisture, and it does give it a better flavor or taste. So yes, that's the three things. The big thing is that I always tell people it adds a lot of juiciness, a lot of moisture to the meat. That's number one. It also definitely helps with the flavor. It makes the steak just taste so good, and it'll help with the texture a little bit. The steak will be really good with that. So, but yeah, great answers on all of that. So now then, with that said, we're going to start getting in now. I always cook at least a choice. Most of the time, though, I'm going to spend a little extra money and get a good, well-marbled prime for those three reasons that we just got through mentioning. I want the steak to be tender. That's another thing it adds is tenderness. It'll really help make the steak more tender, juicy, and more flavorful. That's the three things. So first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about steak selection. Now, we've covered the grade of meat, but I want to show you two different steaks. I'm going to show you my least favorite, and then I'm going to show you my favorite. I'm going to explain the difference. On a ribeye steak, this is what is called a spinalis or a rib cap. It sits up on top of the prime rib. If you've ever had prime rib, this is where the ribeye steak comes from. They go in and they slice it. This is the spinalis, or some people may call it the rib cap. This is the most tender part of this entire steak. This is kind of your chuck where the eye is, and this is the spinalis or rib cap. The most tender part is right here. A lot of times when you look at these, you may see a very small, and I'm going to use the tip of my knife to where it may only be, and just follow along at the tip, it may only be about a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch wide, and it tapers off. And then the next cut, it'll be a little bit bigger. And the next cut over on that ribeye, on that prime rib, it'll get bigger and bigger. I am looking for one that is called, I call this kind of a wraparound spinalis. It's really nice and wide. It almost wraps halfway around the steak. And that's the one I'm going to look if I find a spinalis steak. Be very, very cautious when you're looking at this, careful looking at this, that you pick one that's got a really nice wide spinalis. Like I said, a lot of times they'll be very small. They may only come over to here and stop over here. But if you keep looking, you're going to find one that's got this really big, nice, wide spinalis. You can see here, it's a little bit wider on this side than it is over here. So the cut was getting bigger as it went this way. So this is kind of what it looks like. This is my second choice of a ribeye steak. You pay the same amount of money per pound, whether you get a spinalis steak or one that's got a rib cap, or my favorite steak is this one. This is a tri-heart, and you can see the distinct difference between this steak and this one. This was just the one rib cap. This one is a tri-heart. It has the chuck. It has a heart here, which we call it an eye or a heart. And then you have a major spinalis here. Why is this steak much better? Well, kind of guessed it. This is a major part of that spinalis, and it's a lot bigger than just this little piece right here. Also, the heart is super tender. This will be the most tender part of the whole ribeye steak. So why do I want to pick this one? Well, as you can see, over half the steak is going to be decadent, tender, melt in your mouth before you get down here in the eye or the chuck. So I always will pick a spinalis steak. Now, a lot of times, this is a really big heart. A lot of times you won't see one this big. It'll usually be about the size of a $50. This is probably closer to the size of a silver dollar. This is a really, really big eye. And it's got a really big major spinalis right here. So you pay the same amount of money for these two steaks per pound. If you're going to pick a steak, go ahead and pick the absolute best steak. Now, I bought these in a 3-pack. And usually when you buy a 3-pack, I bought them at Sam's. I'm always looking. Okay, well, I've got one really good major one here. It's got a really nice rib cap on the top, spinalis. And then I have this beauty sitting right next to it. And it was absolutely beautiful. The one next to it was not quite as big as this. That's the one I cooked. I always want to show off the best piece of ribeye when we're doing these classes. So anytime that you're buying one, always buy a tri-heart and try to get one that's got a major spinalis and a pretty good sized heart to it. Does anybody have any question about the selection of these steaks and why we're looking for this particular one over this one?
So I have a question about the age of the steak.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of people that will dry age a steak. Most of the time, if you go to the stores and stuff, major grocery stores don't really get into dry aging steaks. Yes, this dry aging will add a lot more beefy flavor to it and make the steak really tender. I don't have a dry aging machine. They've got steaks that you can put in, or machines that you can put these in, really keeps them nice and chilled and stuff. And I don't really get into dry aging beef. And I certainly don't wet age them. Our briskets, we will wet age for 35 days to help with the beefiness. But that brisket was vacuum sealed from the plant when they first processed the cow, and they vacuum seal it, and it's fine. It was never left that environment from when it was butchered, and it never was cut. It was just cut off the cow. The entire brisket is together, and then they vacuum sealed it. But yeah, if you can buy dry aged beef, it's going to be a little bit more per a pound. They're going to probably add $4 or $5 more per pound because of the dry aging process, but it's going to make the steak a lot more tender, and it's going to give it more of a beefy flavor. I typically look for certified Angus beef anytime that I can buy them. The certified Angus beef cows tend to have more of a really nice beefy flavor.
Mike, I have a question. The other steak, the not as good one. Yep, that kind of fat ball in the middle, I'll call it. Is that something that you should try and avoid, or is that more common with that type of steak with the spinalis wrapping around?
That's a great question. So normally it's not this big. Every cow is going to be a little bit different. A lot of times it'll have a seam in there because it separates the chuck from the spinalis. A lot of times it's not near this big. And ideally, if I can find the steak that doesn't have it, why? Because I'm giving up a lot of meat, right? I'm paying for a lot of fat there. So that's a really good question. This one just happened to be the best pack that gave me a beautiful tri-heart. You notice this is all the fat that it has. A lot of times this little bit of fat here is about all that you have in here. So yeah, if you're picking out steaks individually, you can go through the butcher shop and they'll have them displayed in the window, and you can just go in and say, I want this one. I want this one. You can just definitely go through and pick out the tri-hearts. So, and this is a good example over here. So you can see the heart here, but it kind of is just all major spinalis over here. So that just goes to show this was the beginning of it, and this is kind of the tail end of where you're going to get about 4 steaks that's going to have this major spinalis in the steak. So, but yeah, if you can find one that doesn't have as big of a pocket, get that one.
I have
And
another question. How much fat would you want to cut that off, or would you want to cut any fat off?
This I do not touch. It's in the center of the steak, so I will not cut any of this out. Around this outer edge, we're fixing to show you how we go about trimming this, because I'm going to build a bark on the outside of this steak, and I do not want to bite any of this tough, hard fat. It'll never render out. Remember, this is going to be about a 6-minute cook on the steak, and it's never going to render out. And I want to be able to, this is the best part of the steak, right? I don't want to bite into all this fat, tough gristle that you're not going to be able to chew it. And it's never going to, salt fat is one thing, hard gristly fat, you can't do nothing with it. So I'll show you in the trim process how I'm going to go about getting rid of all of this nasty fat off here on this outside that you really can't do nothing with. You certainly can't chew it. You can see this stuff is just as tough as it can be, and it'll never render down in 6 minutes.
And then in terms of getting the steak, so you said that you get yours from Sam's. Are some grocery stores better than others? For example, a Stop and Shop versus Sam's, or of course, local butchers are probably the best.
Yeah, local butchers are always going to have really good high-end beef. Sam's carries a pretty good selection of steaks. A lot of their steaks are certified Angus beef, and I really do like that. Kroger's, we have a couple, 3 or 4 Kroger's in our town, and Kroger's carries a really, really good selection of steaks as well. So butchers, big, I don't like buying steaks at Walmart. I don't think the steak selection is good as what I've seen at Sam's. I know it's the same company, but I just don't see the quality being the same. So Costco is another one. Costco has some great meats there as well. And then, like I said, local butchers are always awesome. They usually carry some really good, high quality beef.
Awesome. Any other questions on the selection process? All right.
All right. Well, let's get started. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the spinella steak first. And I want to go in and kind of trim this steak up. I know this is going to be the best part, so I really, really want to concentrate on getting all the fat off. Now, I've got one little bitty piece of fat here. It's kind of soft. It's not very much there. I'm just going to go ahead and take it off. If it's hard fat, we always get rid of it. But you can see it kind of had a little gristle that's in there. That's real, real soft there. I like soft fat, and that probably will have a chance to render out. Typically me, I'm going to take it off because I want to get rub on the outside of the steak. And if I've got a lot of fat on the outside of the steak, as that fat is rendering out, it's getting liquid, it's going to wash my rub off, right? So I don't want that. I want to be able to create nice bark on the outside. All right, we're going to come on around here. We've got a little spot right here. I'm going to come in and take this off and get rid of this. All I'm doing is cutting maybe a 1/16. I'm just cutting that outside edge off. Like I said, it's got a lot of silver skin in here, and this old hard fat never will render out. A lot of people, hey, I love fat. Well, this is not the kind of fat that you want to eat. So it'll never render out. Then that's everything around here. I've got a little bit right there. I'm not worried about that little bit. It's just on the very, very outside edge, and that is really soft fat. That'll render out. I'm good with everything over here. But then we got down here at the end. And if you kind of notice this part here, this is the tail of the ribeye. This is not going to cook good. It's going to burn. And this is a big, hard chunk of fat. So what I do is I go ahead and get rid of this part of the steak. So I'll go in, and all I'm doing is, you see that there, I just kind of start right there on that edge, and I'm going to follow this fat seam and just cut this tail off. This has just got a big, hard chunk of fat in it. It's got a lot of gristle in it. There's nothing there to eat. This piece here is going to burn up. Now, if you got a dog and they love steak like mine does, you can take this, put it on the grill it for a few minutes. It'll be perfect. They'll absolutely love that. So I've got a little bit of fat right here. Now that I've cut that off, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this because this has got a lot of hard gristle and a lot of hard fat in it as well. So I'm just going to kind of come over here, and I'm just going to trim this off right here. And this is all the trim that I'm going to do to this. This is kind of soft fat here. Got a little hard piece down there at the bottom. And that's going to be it. I don't do a lot of trim. I just want to get that hard fat off the outside of it. I kind of like a natural looking shape. You know, there's different ways that I can make this steak look. I can go in and make it look round. I don't like it to look like a hockey puck. I like a steak to have a nice teardrop shape to it. So I can kind of shape it like this. I've got a little hard fat here in the middle, but I'm not too concerned with this. This is going to be fine. Sometimes that fat will stick up a little bit. I will take and trim it down just to knock some of it off. I use a grill grate to get beautiful diamond marks on my steaks. So it helps with that. I've got a little bit of fat down here on this end. And one of the things, I'm not going to take this off. Now, this is where the spinalis comes. And if you notice, this is the end of that spinalis. This is the point. You never want to take off all the fat off of this, because if you do, this piece is going to blow out when you cook it. It's going to separate from this fat seam. So anytime that I do these steaks and I'm cutting it at the very point of the spinalis, make sure that you leave about a ½ inch up on it. This one has barely got any right here. And I noticed over here, it goes right to the very end, just the way the butcher cut it. So this one would actually separate when it's cooking. It can be remedied with a little piece of twine going around it. I'm going to show you one today. They did the same thing. They cut it out, and I did not tie it because I wanted to show you what it will do. You can get some butcher twine. I know Academy sells it. I think Walmart sells it. And you can just go around it, trim around, come back around it, tighten a little knot. And all it does, it holds the steak together to keep it from coming apart. And I'm going to show you one today that did that. And I've cooked that one on purpose, and I didn't tie it on purpose because I wanted to show it to you. So anytime that you do this, make sure that you leave that fat over here. I like to leave about at least a finger width of fat holding this in to keep it from blowing out. Anybody got any questions about that? Same goes up here as well. Where this comes around and stops, this was already gone. I would do the same thing. I would leave a little piece of fat right in this area to hold this piece together, because this piece is going to want, as you see, it's already trying to come apart right there. When in doubt, you can always tie it. You won't have that problem. All right, so now let's get over here to this bad boy. Same thing. I've got a real hard piece of fat over here. Got a gristle that runs through it. I'm probably going to get a little bit more aggressive, going a little deeper to get rid of that gristle. And all I'm going to do is just come in here and good sharp knife. This is a Gunter Wilhelm 3.5 inch paring knife. Super sharp. I love those knives. And a good sharp knife really helps with everything. So as you see here, we got all this fat off. I've got a little fat right here that's going to try to hold this part of the spinalis together. So I'm going to trim just a little bit off right here. And this steak is so tender. This is one of the reasons, like I said, I love to cook tri-heart steaks. You can see how tender it is. It's literally trying to fall apart as I'm trimming it. So I'm going to leave a little bit of fat there to hold this little piece together. And then I'm going to come around here and I'm going to get rid of all of this nasty hard fat, because this is really nasty. I've got a tail down here. It's got a hard piece of fat. So we're going to just, once again, come in, we're going to trim this tail off, and we're going to come all the way around here and get rid of all of this. This is some pretty nasty fat right here. So once again, I just follow the fat seam, come on around, and I'm going to make sure that I leave a little bit of fat to hold this piece together, and then we'll stop it.
And I put that in the chat, but Gunter Wilhelm, is it Wilhelm?
Gunter Wilhelm, Gunterwilhelm.
So that's the name of the knives.
Yep.
A bunch of different sets,
Yep.
and he's currently using as well.
Yep, and this is the Lightning Pro Cut series. It's a 3.5 inch paring knife. It is absolutely a great knife. So as you see, all I did is I just went around and took all that off. I left this little piece of fat right in here to hold this piece together. So I won't take that off. And this is really, really soft fat. This fat here, this is just pure nastiness. You can't cut it. You can't rip it. I can't even tear it. This is kind of fat you want to get off. And we'll come over here and look at this side. Same thing. I've got a big piece that's flaking off right here. That's just going to overcook. And so I'm going to cut that little piece off. If you have pieces that's hanging off your steak, go ahead and trim it off, because all it's going to do is just overcook on you, and it's not going to be very good. And that's it. That steak is perfect.
Looks good.
That's what it looks like. And we got all this off. Nice, good, thick steak. These are about 1.25 inches thick steak. These are really, really nice thick steaks. This one is not quite as thick. So I'm going to show you a little bit of something. When you go to put rubs on, I'm going to go a little bit lighter on my rub on this one, because this one's probably almost 1 inch thick. And you can see this one is quite a bit thicker. It's probably 1 3/16 to 1.25 inches.
So what should be the target thickness, right?
Ideally, I like about 1 1/8 inches. That is a really good, just slightly thicker than this. And the reason I say that is the thicker the steak, the more you have to keep flipping it, because you don't want to burn the outside, right? But yet you're trying to get the steak to an internal temperature of, if you want a medium rare steak, you're trying to get it to 126 degrees, 127 degrees. If you like your steak more on the well done side, you better get a thinner steak, because you're going to just have to keep flipping and flipping and flipping. And I don't ever recommend a well done steak anyway. I just know some people, I don't want to eat nothing that's got pink in the middle of it. But ribeye steaks, I love them medium rare. Some people like them medium, that's fine. If you're a medium person, I would definitely go with a little bit thinner steak, maybe 1 inch. If you like them more on the medium rare side, I would go more like this. I would get them 1 1/8 inches. So, and the reason is, and I'll talk about that here in a minute, is the cooking process. The thicker the steak, you got to flip the steak more, because we're trying to get that steak done on the inside, and we don't want to burn it on the outside. Any other questions?
Not in the chat either.
All right. So here we go. Now it's time to get some rub on, and I'm going to kind of show you a couple different things that I do. If you have a steak that is really, really super tender like this, and it's a pretty thick steak, it's not a bad idea to go in and actually tie it. And like I said, all you do is just get some twine, start at the top, come around, cross it over, come back and tie it in a little knot, and just put it right in the center of the steak. And I don't squeeze it tight. Just as soon as it touches the meat, that's it. I don't want to suck the string in, right? If you go too much, it puckers the steak, puts a mark through the middle of the steak. I'm going to show you something now that we're going to do, that we're going to add a couple of different things. And you notice I've been handling the steak. Now we're going to come in and we're going to put some Worcestershire sauce on it. We're going to put some kosher salt on it. And I do this for one reason. Well, there's two things that I do. Does anybody know what salt actually does to the steak? There's two things in particular that it'll do.
Doesn't it start to break down the fiber?
Yes, it does. It makes the steak more tender, because it will help break down the fibers and stuff in the steak. That's the first thing it does. Perfect.
We have it both draws out moisture, but then we also have keeps in moisture.
Okay. Yeah, it will pull. I'm going to explain the process of what happens. So we'll kind of go with that first. Yes, it does pull the moisture out, but it puts it back in. But when it puts it back in, it goes through a reverse osmosis. So let's kind of talk a little bit about that. So what I've got is I've got some Worcestershire sauce, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a light little. We'll get back over here closer to the cutting board where you can see it. It's basically 5 or 6 drops of Worcestershire sauce. It's not a lot. It's just a few little dabs, and all I'm going to do is kind of spread it around. We'll do this on both of the steaks. And the first thing I like to do is I'll take my steaks immediately out of the refrigerator and trim them. A steak that is nice and cool or cold trims a lot better than when they start to get any kind of, if they've been out 30 minutes, it's already harder to trim it. So it's just a very light little dab of Worcestershire sauce. And then we're going to come in and we're going to hit it with some Morton's kosher salt. I've got people ask me a lot of times, well, can you use sea salt? Yeah, you can. I just prefer the kosher salt because it is coarser and it's a little easier to see. And all of my recipes are behind kosher salt. Sea salt is a lot finer, so you can't put as much on it, volume wise, because it's going to have more volume because it's a finer salt. So all this is just a light little sprinkle, just a little dusting, and that's it. It's not a lot. It's just little snowflakes, and that's it. And I'll give it a little pat. I'll set it off to the side. I'm gonna go ahead and do this one. Same thing.
One side of that, Mike.
Now we're gonna flip it over. We're gonna give it a little pat. And now we're gonna flip this over. Well, that one is so tender. You can already see how tender that steak is. It's literally trying to fall apart. So once again, little Worcestershire sauce. Same over here, little splash. I don't want a lot. Get too much, you can always push it off. And then come back, same thing, just a light little dust. And the thicker steak, you could get by with a little bit more, but I don't want much. It's just a light little dusting, and that's all it is. And we're gonna set it over here and let these just chill out on the cutting board and leave them out. So
They want to know if you keep the steak, get it to room temperature.
yeah, so we were fixing to talk about room temperature. So what we do is we take the steaks out, I immediately trim them. It usually takes me 5 minutes. The steaks are trimmed, and I put my salt on the steaks. And I like for these steaks to sit out for, the thicker the steak is like this, I would probably want the steak to sit out for 2.5 hours. I'm trying to get this thing closer to about 75 or 80 degrees before it goes on the grill. Same thing with this steak. You probably want to leave it out at least 2 hours and just room temperature. And all you're wanting to do is just let these steaks sit with this salt on it. What's going to happen in about 45 minutes, you're going to come in and you're going to see a lot of water up on top of this steak. And what the salt is doing, it is drawing the water, the moisture up out. And in about another hour, hour and a half after that, what you're going to see is that moisture is going to pull back down into the steak. And that is a reverse osmosis. When it pulls to the surface, the water that pulls up out of the steak, the moisture that's coming out will dissolve the salt. And when it pulls back down in the steak, now it's going to take that salty water and it's going to flavor it deep down throughout the meat and give it more flavor. And it's going to make the steak more tender. So typically what we would do here is we would just let these steaks sit. And on this, I would like for them to sit for at least 2.5 hours.
They want to know
So-
if you ever dry brine your steaks.
I don't really do a dry brine. I mean, this is kind of the same thing. We're going in, salting it, and just dry brining it. This is about all I do. With this type of steak, especially when you're dealing with a tri-heart, you can see this steak is so tender. It literally is trying to fall apart. It is super, super soft.
They want to know if
So-
you cover it or leave it.
No, just leave it sitting out just like this. Don't do anything. Just let it sit on the cutting board. Just pat it a little bit and let it sit.
What about sea salt?
Can you let it sit too long?
Say again.
Can you let it sit too long? In other words, you have two different sizes there, right? So one you would have had 2 hours, the other one 2.5. So the other one's going to be a little extra, 30 minutes.
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's not going to hurt. All you're trying to do is just get it up to, about 75 or 80 degrees. It's not going to hurt if it sits out another 30 minutes. 15 or 20 minutes is not going to hardly change the temperature of these steaks. These steaks have already been out for 30 minutes. They came out of a 36-degree refrigerator, and I guarantee you these things are probably still 42 degrees right now. So it doesn't hurt. Just give them a couple hours, 2.5 hours to sit out. 2.5 hours is usually what I like to do to let them start getting close to about 75 or 80 degrees. Somebody mentioned something about sea salt. I prefer to use kosher salt. You can use sea salt. It's just a light little dust, and be careful that you don't get carried away with how much. Remember, it's a finer salt than kosher salt. So a finer coat would be required. It's just a light little dust, and don't get too much on it. We want the flavor to come from the rubs. We don't want to get so much salt on it that it gets the steak too salty. I'm just using this as a tenderizer and to get flavor down into the meat itself.
Looks good.
Any other questions? Nothing else. Okay. So without that, let's just say now we're getting ready. Let's just say this is a 2.5 hour process. from say we're gonna take them out at 12:30 and we want them to go on the grill at 3 o'clock. So trim them, put the salt on them. About 30 minutes before they're going to go on the grill is when I'm gonna add my rub. And they're gonna have a lot of moisture. They're gonna have a lot of water on them. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna take a paper towel and I'm gonna dry them really, really well because I don't want any moisture on them. If there's moisture on your cutting board, same thing, dry that moisture off. The one thing I do not want to do is have a lot of liquid on my steak and put my rub on. If I do, it's going to turn the rub to a paste and I can't build a nice, good bark, a good crust on the outside. So I make sure my cutting board's dry. I make sure the steak is dry. And now it's time to come in and put my rubs on. The first rub that we're going to use is all queued up steak shake. This rub is absolutely amazing. It was developed by the 2019 point runner-up, Mr. John Lindsay. It has got a little salt, a little pepper, a little garlic. It's got some butter bulb in it. The first thing you're going to be able to smell is the butter when you open this. This stuff is amazing on popcorn and it's amazing on burgers and pork chops as well. So, and chicken, you can put a base coat of chicken. It's a great all-purpose rub. So this is a little bit thicker steak. I'm going to go a little bit heavier on this one because it's about 1.25 inches. Now, you're going to see a lot of rub go on this, and you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, that steak is going to be so salty. Understand, this is not a rub that came from a grocery store. This was a competition rub that was developed so you can build layers of flavor and you can go a little bit heavier. It's just not so salt-based as what you buy in a store. Salt's the cheapest ingredient that you can put in a rub. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and I'm going to sprinkle this outside edge because I want to be able to develop a nice bark, a nice little crust on the outside of this steak. So I'm going to go in. Once again, you notice I'm using a clean hand. I didn't have a hand that I had been trimming the steak with. I don't like to see people grab a bottle of rub and they've been trimming the steak and then all of a sudden the rub bottle goes in the cabinet and that's just disgusting. So once we got that done, we're going to come in, give this a nice dusting. It's a pretty thick steak, but that's about how much I like to put on it because it's kind of thick. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give it a light little pat. Do not rub a rub. You pat it. If I rub it, all I'm going to do is ball it up. It's not going to be even across my steak. And now that I've patted it in, you can see the meat. Same thing over here. I'm going to go just a little bit lighter, not quite as heavy because it's not quite as thick. So we're going to come over here. And I'm going to say that's about right. See, it's a little bit lighter. I'll give it a little pat. And one thing I forgot to do is I didn't get my outside edge. So we'll come around here on the outside edge. Give a little pat. Now we're going to go ahead and put our second rub on. Our second rub is Be Extreme Steak Dust. This was developed by the 2018 Steak Cook-Off Association World Champion, Mr. Terry Roan. This is a very, very balanced rub. It is amazing on steak. It's amazing on burgers as well. This steak will really have some serious flavor with these two rubs. So I'll come around the same thing. It's just a light little kiss on the outside, building a little bit of flavor, building a little crust on that. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to hit the top of this.
Mike, can you show us that bottle again when you're done, the second one?
Yeah. The Extreme Steak Dust.
And where are you getting these from? I know you've got some partners down there, but where can these people, if they're interested in buying another bottle, get that from?
Yeah, you can get it at Lone Star Barbecue Pro Shop. They carry it. And he carries all of these rubs. So you can kind of see it's just a nice light little coat. And you can play around with your rub, how much that you like to put on it. If you like, I like a little saltier pop on my steak. So I want a little bit more rub on it. Now on this one, I'm going to go a little bit heavier. First thing I'm going to do is come around on this outside edge. And this steak right here is definitely going to be going on the grill when I get done. So, and then I'm going to come over the same thing because it's a little bit thicker steak. I'm going to give it a little bit heavier. Can you see that pretty good, Danielle?
Yep, looks great.
Go in here and it's going to be a little bit heavier coat. And that's about what I want to put on it because it's a little heavier, a little thicker. Give it a little pat. And then we're gonna flip it over. We've already done our outside. We're gonna come back with our 2 rubs, all queued up, steak shake. This is the thicker one, a little bit heavier. Something like this. Little pat. Remember, thinner steak would even be less. And then I'll come in and go ahead and hit it with the extreme steak dust. It's a little bit coarser. It's got some black pepper in it. It's got some paprika in it. It's got a little sugar in it. There it is. Your little pat. I'm using the back of my hand because I don't want to start getting moisture. If you get too much moisture on your glove, it'll start to stick and I'll start pulling that rub off. So I can flip over, use the back of my hand, fingers, and we're good. We're gonna set this off the side. Remember, I'm adding this about 30 minutes before it goes on the grill. All right, so we're back to this thinner steak. I'm gonna go a little bit lighter. Does anybody know why I'm going lighter?
Because
Remember, it's a thinner steak. Here we go. Not a trick question.
I
And then-
learned it.
And then we're gonna come back over here a little bit lighter. Over here, we're gonna get that rib cap, that's finales.
I mean, I know the answer was, yeah, it's thinner, but I mean, what's the reason? I mean, if you're getting the taste from it, what's really the difference between an inch and an inch and a quarter? of
Okay,
rub?
so what would end up happening is it would be a lot more bolder, saltier steak, right? I mean, I've got a 1-inch thick steak here. And if I put this amount of rub that I put on this one on this, it's gonna be way, way saltier, right? Because the steak is not as thick. I don't have as much meat. These steaks are the same size. This steak probably weighs 12 ounces. This steak over here probably weighs 16 ounces. So
Okay.
I've got a lot thicker steak. And when I cut into it, because it's thinner and I'm putting the same amount on both sides, I'm gonna have a very, very salty steak. Thicker the steak, you can get by with more rub on it. Thinner the steak, if you put that much on the 3/4, if I put this much on the 3/4 inch steak, it'd be so salty you couldn't hardly eat it. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so there we go. And I like to put that on about 30 minutes before they hit the grill. So any questions about the process? The little kosher salt, as soon as you get done trimming them, I like to give them at least 2 hours, about 30 minutes before they go on the grill. Little steak shake, a little steak dust. Watch the thickness of the steaks. Play around with your salt level. I like a little salty pop on my steak. So I think it just beef needs salt. I mean, I'm close to Texas, so we love salt on our beef, and it brings out the flavor. It brings out the beefiness. These will be really, really good. If you can try two, go a little light on one and go a little bit heavier on the other, and find the right amount that you like. So, but they pair very, very, very well with these two. So let's
Would
go
you
over here.
wrap that?
Go
Would
ahead.
you wrap that after you put all the rubs and
No.
everything on?
No, everything goes, it's just at this point, they just sit on the cutting board. That's all we're doing. We don't wrap them. If I wrap them, what's going to end up happening is they're going to start to sweat even more. I don't want this steak to start to get liquid, because as it starts to pull any kind of moisture out and starts to get liquid, it's going to make my rubs softer and turn them into a paste, right? They start to get mushy. I want to dry that steak well. I want to put my rubs on, and then 30 minutes later, I want them going on the grill. I do not want these rubs to soften much.
Yeah, I'm trying to get that right. Okay.
Okay, we good?
Yep.
Okay, so yes, that's why I only put my rubs on about 30 minutes before. It'll be melted into the steak. As you can already see, I mean, this has just been a few minutes, and that rub is just literally already down in it. This has been 5 minutes. So 30 more minutes, they'll be just right. Be perfect to put them on. So
One
don't,
other question I have is when you put the salt on, when you're waiting 2 or 2.5 hours, do you just put it in the cutting board, or where do you put that? What do you?
Yeah. Just right here on the cutting board.
And don't let your dog get to it.
Yeah, just don't let the dog get, yeah, keep it away from the dog. So yeah, no, everything I do stays on the cutting board. they don't go back in the refrigerator. They go back in the refrigerator. We're not gonna get them to room temperature, right? So salt them, let them sit on the cutting board. After 2 hours, dry them off really good. Dry your cutting board with, I use Bounty paper towels, dry them up really good, dry the steaks really good, get all the moisture off. Because if they've got tons of liquid on top of the steak and you put this on it, it defeats the purpose of what I just got through saying. It's gonna take that rub and it's gonna turn it into a paste. And I'm not gonna develop that good crust on the outside of my steak, right? So leave them sitting on the cutting board while they got salt on them, dry everything up really good, dry the steak good, dry the cutting board really good, and then add your 2 layers of rub on the outside edge and then on the steak itself, and just let them sit out on the cutting board. Let them come up to room temperature. And I like to do this about 30 minutes before they go on.
Couple questions here in the chat for you.
Okay.
Let's start with the first one. What is the internal temperature of the grill? I think we'll get to that, right? The internal temperature of the grill when you're ready to put them on.
Yep.
Any difference in prep, the rub specifically for beefalo prime rib / steak?
No, I mean, what kind of, I mean, the rubs itself, we do put them on in a layer. The steak shake always goes on first because that's the saltier rub. And you always want the salt closest to the meat, okay? We do this one last, the steak dust, because it's gonna give it that beautiful red color. And people eat with their eyes first, right? So there's a certain, and we don't mix the two together. Well, can't you just mix them? No, you cannot. Put them on in layers. Put them on in layers. It makes a big difference. It really does. It will change the taste of the actual steak. When we do I've got 7 different rubs that goes on my brisket, and they all go on, and this one goes on, it's salt, pepper, garlic, and then I've got another rub that goes on, another rub that goes on, another rub that goes on. So it's layers of flavor that we're trying to build when we're doing any of our cooking, whether it's steak or brisket or beef or anything.
And does the Worcestershire sauce act as a binder? Does it add any taste? And is there any substitutions for it?
You could, yeah, it's not really a binder. Remember, the only thing that we're using just a dab of Worcestershire sauce is such a small amount. I really don't think it's changing the flavor of anything. It's mainly to start the process of liquefying the salt, right? That's all it is. Some people will just take it and just put the salt right on it. It just takes a little bit longer to start breaking down the salt. I like to add just a little bit to have a little moisture on the surface. And then some of this may get pulled down into the steak, but it's such a small little amount. I don't really detect the flavor. If you don't want to use Worcestershire sauce, you can use just a little dab of water. Once again, all we're trying to do is break down the salt. So you could just mist it with a little mister, or just take your hand, have a little water, just rub a light little amount of water on it. Remember, it's not very much. It's probably, I probably had a half a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce on that whole steak, and then just smear it around. And if it looks like it's got a lot puddled, you saw on one I did, I just wiped it off. I just want it glisten, and that's it. And put your salt on it.
And then we have a very interesting question, in my opinion. Have you cooked a steak in mac and cheese powder, and is it any good? I've never heard of that.
I have not. I want to taste steak. I don't want I love mac and cheese, but I have not cooked a steak in it. So no, have not. That's a good, I've never heard that before.
I haven't either. Has anybody done that?
I've never done it. I want my steak to taste like steak. I don't want the mac and cheese. So, all right, that's some good questions. If y'all got any other questions, these are great. This is what these classes are all about. I love answering all this type of stuff. So,
I've heard of back ketchup steak.
did somebody say about putting ketchup on a steak?
Yeah, I think so. And then you grill it.
No. I'll show you what we'll put on the steak. We're going to take the juice that comes out of the steak, and that's what we're going to put on the steak. I do know some people that absolutely love ketchup on the steak. I can't bring myself to do it.
And Chris, our mac and cheese wizard, I'll call him, said that it's been a popular method on social media, and there's a whole Reddit thread. Of course, social media always tries these types of things.
That's funny.
This is what.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm wanting. I'm just gonna stick with the good rub. That's pretty
Chris,
funny.
you better try that, and then you tell us how it is, okay? We'll let you be the guinea pig.
Give it a whirl, that's for sure. All right,
One more
so-
thing. So a lot of people keep asking me if a recording is going to be sent out. Yes, this is recorded. And for those of you in attendance, you will receive this tomorrow. And then somebody was asking about a spicy Caribbean rub. Do you have a recommendation, or is that something that you've put on your steaks before?
No, I really never have. I'm more of just that good,
Competition.
just good Texas style, salt, pepper, garlic, good flavor throughout it. If I wanted to put a little bit more heat on the steak, I would probably go in with either a coarse black pepper, a fresh coarse black pepper, or you could use maybe some like red cayenne pepper if you like a little bit more spicy. I would use the same stuff. If you like a little bit of heat, then use a fresh coarse black pepper, or you could use some cayenne pepper.
How do these rubs typically work well regardless of the type of steak? In other words, what you're doing here for a rub on a ribeye, would that work well for a fillet?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, these rub combinations work for any steak, and they work great for hamburgers, stuff like that. It's really a versatile rub. Anything with beef, these are amazing. So yeah, it would work for any steak. New York strip, T-bone, filet mignon, sirloin, any of them. It would work great for all of those.
Since you brought up burgers, would you actually put the rub on and still let the burgers sit for a while? Because normally you put them together and you put them on a grill. I mean, do you let them sit with rub?
Yeah, if I was doing burgers, I would kind of do the same thing. I would just go in. I do like a little Worcestershire sauce on my burgers, so I'll give them a little dab of this. I'll pat that down into the meat, and then I'm going to come in. I'm going to make sure it's not soaking wet, but I'm going to come in. I'm going to hit it with the steak shake. Then I'm going to come in and hit it with the steak dust. I'm going to give it about 10 minutes, and then they're going to hit the grill. And I'm going to give you a little pro tip on something with burgers. So I always use 80-20 chuck. And the reason I use chuck is because instead of just like ground meat, is because it comes from this part. It comes from the chuck. I know exactly what meat that I'm getting. And I like to use an 80-20, obviously, because I've got fat content. It gives me moisture. If you want to try something to really amp up your burgers, get you some portobello mushrooms. Good fresh portobello mushrooms. Take them and chop them up really good. And mix it in with your hamburger meat, about 75% hamburger meat and about 25% portobello mushrooms, and blend that together with your meat. I use the onions a lot, but portobello mushrooms will give that. There's two things that it does. One, it gives it a really nice umami flavor, and it will add a lot of extra moisture to it because a mushroom's got a lot of water in it, right? So when you chop it up really fine and mix it in with your hamburger meat and cook it, it makes an amazing hamburger.
I do that with meatballs. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah, same thing, 100%. So it works really, really good. I like to mix onions, mushrooms, and you talk about an unbelievable burger. Oh my gosh, they're like mind-blowing, crazy good. So, but these two rubs are amazing on burgers.
We also had a question, would you ever use a meat tenderizer or poultry hammer?
Not on this steak. If you have a choice or a prime, especially if you get the tri-heart, this thing is literally about to fall apart as we sit here. So you can see this thing is literally breaking apart. It is so tender. I mean, I could literally push all the way through this steak. So no, we don't need to tenderize it. If you got a good quality steak to begin with, it doesn't need it. And if you're getting tri-hearts, this steak is so much softer than this one. I mean, give you an example. I mean, I can push this steak and you don't see nothing, right? It's just firm. This is the chuck eye. If I go over here to this steak, I've got to be gentle because it's trying to fall apart. I can literally push all the way through that steak. Look at the dimple. So you know that this steak is going to be amazing and tender.
They want to know what kind of hamburger meat you're using with your hamburger, 80-20 blend.
80-20 ground chuck, not ground beef. Ground beef comes from everything. Ground chuck is going to usually come from the chuck part of this meat, like especially like this. So it's better flavor, and I know what I get every time with ground chuck. Any other questions?
Are you grinding them together, the mushrooms, or just chopping?
No, I just chop them up. I chop it up real fine and then blend it in with the burger.
So we haven't gotten to it yet, but I'd like to see which way you go with it, whether you're gonna do like a steakhouse sear or you're gonna do a reverse sear.
Okay, so yeah, we've got a couple different ways that we do this. I don't really do a reverse sear cooking it on the grill. I brought them up to 80 degrees, and by it being up to 80 degrees, I'll have a really good hot grill, and I'll show you how we just cook it, flip it, and you'll get a really amazing steak. All right. The only time that I'm going to reverse sear a steak is if I'm going to cook it in a cast iron skillet. If I cook this in a cast iron skillet, I'm going to take this steak and I'm going to put it on a cookie sheet with a wire rack on the cookie sheet. And I'm going to take this steak and I'm going to put on it on the wire rack. I'm going to have an oven preheated at 300 degrees, and I'm going to stick this steak in the oven at 300 degrees until it comes to an internal temperature of 110 degrees. And at 110 degrees, it's going to come out. And then I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it in a cast iron skillet with some butter and some chopped up garlic. Okay, so I've reverse seared it by just mainly bringing the temperature up. When you bring it up to 110 degrees and you have a really good hot cast iron skillet, and you drop it in that skillet with some butter and some garlic, if you want to put a little thyme in it, you can do that as well. And you'll drop it in and let it go for about 1:45 seconds. And then you take the steak and you flip it over and give it another 1:45 seconds. And while I flip it the first time, this is the crust side, I'll start basting it with butter. And then when I'm cooking it, that'll give you a good medium rare steak. Cook it to an internal temperature of about 126 degrees, 127 degrees. But the reason that we're raising that up to 110 degrees is I only have 2 flips. I put the steak in a skillet with butter. I let it go about 1:40 seconds. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to have a beautiful crust on it. It's going to be golden brown. I'm going to give it another 1:15 or 1:30 seconds, and I'm going to temp it. And by doing that, I get a beautiful steak that's going to be a perfect medium rare. It takes a little practice. Dinner steak's going to obviously come up faster temperature than what an 1.25 inch steak like this one would be. If I'm doing a cast iron skillet one, I'd probably just shoot for about a 1 inch, 1 1/8 steak, no thicker than that. Okay, so that's how I would do a reverse sear when I'm going to cook it in a cast iron skillet. Now, I want to go now to it. Does that answer your question on that?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Okay, so let's go over here now to a grill. I like to get my grill going, and I just use charcoal. You can use Kingsford, you can use B&B. I prefer B&B. It's what a lot of the competition guys are doing. It's got a little oak in it. And I do a taper. So if you kind of look at my grill, you can kind of see this is tapered, right? I got a lot of coals back here, and it tapers down to a little heart shape down here at the end. And I'll turn this way where you can see it. And the reason is by it being tapered, I've got a really hot part of the grill here. It's not going to be quite as hot over here. And the reason I do that is my steak is starting to come up to temperature. If they're getting too hot over here and it's starting to burn the outside and it's not up to temperature yet, I can move it over here to a cooler zone on my grill. So I don't hardly have any charcoal down here on this end, just a little bit. I've got the majority of it over here. So what I'll do is I'll just take my grate. Once I got these nice and hot, I'll go in, I'll put my grate on, and now I've got this ready to where all I have to do is just come in here and put my steaks on over here, and I can move them back and forth from this side to keep my temperature where I need it to be. So typically what I'll do is I'll get it on. Once I get my grill grate on, I'll spray this with some Pam or some kind of cooking spray, and I'll just drop my steak on, and I'll keep it, kind of pull it together. And I'll drop them on. I kind of watch it. I got a little stopwatch. Basically, I use it off of my phone. And all I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm going to give that steak about 1:45 seconds. and I'm going to take it and I'm going to flip it. You can get you a spatula. I got a cotton glove that I wear with these nitrile gloves, and it's kind of a hot glove. So I can take my hand and flip it, or if you got a spatula, you can lift it over and flip it. But I'm going to give it about 1 minute and 45 seconds. I'm going to flip it. I'm going to do 1 minute and 45 seconds. I'm going to flip it. I'm going to come back over here again. I'll probably go like a minute this time. I don't want to burn it. I'm trying to get that temperature even. So I'm going to give it about a minute, and I'm going to flip it. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to give it a minute, and I'm going to flip it. And then I'm going to check my temperature. And I've got a little probe that's a digital probe that I go in, and I want to just check it right in the middle of where that temperature is. So it's really, really important that you kind of watch your temperature. You don't want your fire to get too hot every time I'm flipping. I'm walking away from my camera. But as you flip it, you want to shut your lid. So you put it on, you flip, close your lid. You put it on, you flip, you close your lid. Don't leave the lid open the whole time. And what I'm doing is I just use a little thermopin, and I want to go halfway. This little needle, it gets a little smaller. This is a 1/2 inch, and I see where that shoulder is. I know that's halfway. That's a 1/2 inch. See, this steak's been out for over an hour. It's 64 degrees. So it's going to take a while to get up to 75 degrees. So I'm just trying to shoot for an internal temperature right here in the middle. I'm going to check it in a couple of places, and I'm looking for about 126 degrees, 127 degrees for a medium rare steak. But the key is put it on, close your lid. Get in and out as quick as you can. Flip them, close your lid, because that's where flare-ups start. Every time I do it, I'll put my lid on. A lot of times, if I got a lot of grease cooking and it's trying to flare up, you can close your top vent or just barely crack it open. That'll put the fire out, right? No oxygen. So that's how I go about doing it. If it starts to get to where it's starting to get pretty dark here and it's not up to your temperature yet, well, that's the great thing. I can move it over here in this cooler part, and then I can move my steaks around over here. So that's just one of the ways that I go about doing it. Control your fire. Don't get the fire so hot. And at the same time, if it starts to get too dark, remember, keep flipping, keep flipping. You won't burn it, but you're cooking the steak throughout, and it gives you that beautiful color on the outside without burning. You don't want a scorched black steak, right? A little char on the fat is fine. But if you do this and you flip, like I said, my first 2 flips are 1 minute and 45 seconds. And then after that, I'm going to flip it every minute. Every time I flip it, I'm going to put my lid on. And by doing that, I'm going to have a really, really, really good steak. I'll have great color on it, and I'm cooking it to the temperature that I'm looking for. Like I said, for medium rare, I'm going to pull them at about 127. And it'll carry over about 4 degrees, maybe 5 degrees. If you like it medium, take it up to about 134 degrees. That's going to probably carry to about 139. That'll give you a medium steak. If you start going over that, you're going to get into that well done stuff. You're going to take it to 145. It's going to carry over to about 146 degrees. So at that point, it's just literally then got a steak where it's just not going to be very juicy. For the simple fact that you cooked all the moisture out of it because it got so hot. So
about the juices, do you have to worry at all about losing the steak juices when you flip that much?
No, because what we're doing is we're putting it on and we're searing it, right? We're getting it really hot. We're building that crust, and then we're going to flip it. So we're locking in that juice right off the get-go. That's why I said that first time I'm going to give it 1 minute and 45 seconds. I'm going to sear that bottom. I'm going to flip it over 1 minute, 45 seconds. I'm going to sear that other one. And I'm not being rough with the steak. I mean, I like to use my hand with a glove on. I wear a cotton glove. I don't have any in here. It's a cotton glove with these black gloves over the top of it. I'll just grab the steak and I'll flip it over, and I'll go flip. Or you can, I don't want to use a tong. If you're going to use anything, use the spatula. Go underneath it with the spatula, pick it up, and then just set it down, right? And do the same thing. I don't like using a tong because it wants to pull the steak apart. You can never use.
They want to know if you sear the steak edges.
I do not sear the steak edges. No, I really don't. That thing is going to be cooking so hot, it's going to get around the edge. And all that rub that we put on the outside, it's going to bark up and it's going to get firm on there.
For those that use gas grills, so you could actually do one side of it, higher temperature, and obviously go to the other side with the lower temperature. You have guidance on what those temperatures should be?
You would probably want to start off like on medium high, you know, get it pretty hot. I mean, that's the whole thing. You're trying to get that steak really seared on that outside really quick, right? So I would say on a gas grill, I don't ever cook on gas, but I would do medium high. I don't think you need to necessarily put it on high because we're going to flip it a couple times, right? We're trying to get even temperature throughout that steak. So a minute and 45 seconds, a minute and 45 seconds. You're going to flip it over again, probably a minute and 45 seconds, and then you're going to temp it. I cook on grill grates. It gives me these beautiful diamond marks on my steak. And mine is 4 flips, a minute and 45, I flip it, a minute and 45, I flip it, a minute and 45, I flip it, and then I temp it. And I did that today, and my steak was at 118 degrees. Well, when I went to that last flip at a minute and 45 seconds, it was only on there about a minute. It hit 129 degrees, and I pulled it. And then it went to about 133, 134 degrees. So that's what you kind of have to play around with. If it starts to get to where the steak is getting nice, really pretty dark on the outside, and it hasn't come up to temperature yet, then that's when you can put it over on your low side, put it on low, and just kind of let it come on up to temperature, because it's not going to take a lot to come up to temperature from that point. Great questions. A lot of great questions.
Very good.
Any other questions? Key is every time you flip, open that lid, flip it, close the lid. Open the lid, flip it, close the lid. That keeps your flare ups. Man, this steak smells good.
Don't do that to us.
Wow.
Do not do that to
I
us.
didn't get the fall off of it. Oh my gosh. You smell that? No, that smell good.
Mhm. Yeah, I bet it does.
Oh my gosh.
So, I have another question. Which goes better with the cooking, bourbon or scotch?
Probably a bourbon. So, all right. So when I got done with the steak, I like to put it on a piece of foil. I like to put it in a pan. When the steak comes off, I always like to rest the steaks at least minimum 5 minutes. I prefer 10 minutes before you cut into it. So let the steaks rest for about 10 minutes. And I'm going to show you what my steak looks like here. I'm going to go in. Now, one of the things we had talked about ketchup, we don't do ketchup, but I'll go in and I put diamond marks on my steaks because it gives me these beautiful grill marks. I know I got a lot of ladies watching, so diamond's a girl's best friend.
Mhm.
And here we go. This is what it looks like. It's really nice. It's really juicy. And remember, I was telling you about the spinalis because it blew out. Well, see how this broke out over here? And that's because the fat was not on that edge, and it barely had enough fat over here holding this together. I didn't want to tie it because I wanted to show you what'll happen when you cut that little piece of fat off. So I could have tied it and it would have all stayed together. Does it hurt anything? Well, it can overcook this piece because now it's detached from the steak. But I felt like this would be a good one to show you. There's nothing wrong with it. It's going to still be a great piece of steak, but that's what I'm looking for. It's got beautiful color on the outside, beautiful grill marks. You can see them grill marks are just really nice and dark. And then I've got some juice that was in it. And I'm going to take this juice. Here's my ketchup right here. This is the juice that came out of the steak. This will be the best part of it right here. Obviously, for me, the best part of this steak is going to be the spinalis. So I usually like to come out here and make little cuts. Steak's still warm. And we'll come in here and cut across it. Let's see what we've got here for our color. I'm looking for kind of, I try to do like more of a medium, not too heavy medium rare because I don't want to gross people out. But you can see it's just nice. Now this will get a lot pinker as it sits here. A little air hits it and that'll start to get a lot pinker. But to me, that's like perfect. And this steak's been sitting a while. So the longer you rest them, they will tend to cook, because I took it off and immediately put it in a pan and I wrapped it with tinfoil to try to hold some heat in it. But you can see the steak is just really nice and juicy. I don't have to squeeze. I love people squeezing these steaks and pushing everything out. I don't really go about doing that. I want the moisture to stay in it. And then we'll come down here on this spinalis. Really nice and super tender. Like I said, this is the best part of the steak. Cut some of this little fat off on this here. And then we got these are the spots that I like more than any of them. So, and then from that, we'll go in, give this a little try, see what it tastes like. So
Somebody wants to know if you can use an air fryer.
use an air fryer. I've never used an air fryer to cook a steak. So anyway, so let's see what this tastes like. Looks pretty good. Nice and tender, really soft. Absolutely delicious. For my camera girl, please. Man, a
Samples
lot.
for everyone.
Yeah. Wow. Just great flavor. Good balance. Like I said, I like a little saltier steak. It has a little salty right off the get-go, and then it just kind of goes away. And that's what I like in my steak. So play around with the amount of rubs that you put on it. Find that flavor profile that you like. Keep them the same, you know, layer this, make them light, but make them both the same. So anyway, really good steak. Y'all had some great questions today.
Mhm.
Man, that's good. Any other questions?
Questions? Oh, Jinx, what other questions do you guys have? We have about 15 minutes left. If you guys do have anything, what would you add to go sweeter? A
If you
sweet
want-
steak?
A sweeter steak. So one of the things that we add is, if we're trying to add a sweet flavor, is some sugar in the raw, turbinado sugar. We use this on our ribs. And when I wrap my brisket, I add a little bit of this on top of my brisket, along with a little agave. It's not a lot. So what we're trying to do for competition is we want to give the judge something that's very well balanced. I want a little, we basically look at it like this. We got a square box and I'm trying to stay in the middle of that square box. So I want something savory. I want something that's got a touch of sweet. I want something that's got a little bit of heat. I want something that's got a little bit of smoke. And I want to be right in the center so you taste all of that, because that's what makes the taste buds explode. So we'll wrap our brisket with just a little bit of turbinado sugar and a little agave to balance out some of the salt, because we put a lot of rubs on our brisket. It's a big, thick piece of meat, right? So it'll help balance out that flavor. Do you taste the sweetness? It's one of them things when you're eating it, you're going, oh my gosh, this is so savory, and you can taste the pepper, and and all of a sudden you're over there, I taste a little sweetness on this, and it's just this subtle little, you can taste it, but your mind is over there making you think, is this sweet that I'm tasting? So it's really exciting. The taste buds, instead of somebody coming across the table, that's salt, pepper, garlic, salt, pepper, garlic. And if every brisket tastes like that, when the judges are eating it, then you don't stand out. So you're trying to make something that's just wows the judges. We don't cook for certified judges. We cook for people right off the street. So I could be cooking for somebody that's 18 years old, and I've seen people at the same judging table. There may be somebody 75 years old. So I have got to cook very good, well-balanced barbecue, because I never know who I'm going to be cooking for. Every town we go to, they pull the locals, say, hey, come on in and judge. We never know who we're cooking for. So you have to be able to cook good, well-balanced barbecue. So if you're looking for adding a little sweetness, try this first. This has got actually salt is the first ingredients. Brown sugar is the second ingredient, right? So it's already got a little bit of that in there. It's very balanced. Like I said, this was developed by a world champion, and he won 9 competitions in 2018 when he won the world championship. And it is a very good rub. So try it. These are not store-bought rubs. You will not develop layers of flavor with store-bought rubs like you will with these.
Do you want to do a little plug-in for Barbecue Champs Academy? Somebody was asking if we can do a brisket class next, which of course we don't currently have one scheduled, but Mike does offer it. And he's got some online classes. So if you want to tell them about that, it's probably a good opportunity as well.
Yeah, so you can go to bbqchamps.com. We have an amazing array of world champion barbecue pitmasters. If you like more of a Texas style brisket. Corey Mike's class is absolutely unbelievable. He's from Texas. He's a 3-time world champion. Matter of fact, this coming Monday, I'll leave to go to the American Royal, which is the biggest barbecue competition in the world. It's in Kansas City. There'll be 500 teams there. Corey is a 3-time world champion. He's had a first place chicken. He's had a first place rib. And last year he had a perfect 180 score and had a first place brisket. So you can check out his class. If you buy just a brisket class from any of these guys, it's $249. And we walk you through everything of selection, how to trim it, how to inject it, which rubs to put on it. We talk about the cooking process and how to go about slicing it, everything. So yeah, it's $249. There's a bunch of different cooks. We have a guy that was on Barbecue Pit Masters back in 2013, 2012 or 2000. I think it was 2012. His name was Robbie Roll with Rescue Smokers. He won that. Got a lot of big guys on there, big names. Mark Lambert is a 7-time world barbecue champion. He won Memphis in May this year in pork. He's got a brisket class on there as well. I mean, these are the best barbecue pit masters in the United States, and they're all part of Barbecue Champs Academy. So you can select any one class for $249. If you want to add another class to it, it's only $150 more. If you want to learn brisket, ribs, pork butt, and chicken, you can get all 4. It's normally $699. You get $100 off. It's $599. And with that, you get access to a private Facebook page where if you have questions about anything in the videos or you're struggling with something, these world champs will be there to help you deal with your issues and tell you how to fix things. So it's a really cool deal. And if you use BBQ, let's see, I think there's a coupon code. I think it's BBQ Champs or either it's Champs. And I can't remember. I've had it on there a long time. I kind of tell people about it. I know one that's on there is, I can't remember. If you need it, and if you are interested in the class, just shoot me an email, and I'll give any of your listeners a 20% discount. So just let me know if somebody is interested in any of those classes. Just shoot me an email at info@bbqchamps.com. info@bbqchamps.com. Say, look, I'd love to get a brisket class or whatever class. It doesn't matter. Let me know, and I will give you a 20% discount coupon code that you can use at checkout. Get 20% off.
Fabulous. And if you guys don't have that email, I did put it in the chat, but feel free to reach out to me directly and I can get you in contact.
And we
All
got
right, what else?
lots of votes. Any other questions? This has been awesome.
Well, let's hear it. Any final questions?
I do have a question. If nobody else has a question about beef, do you ever cook any wild games like maybe elk or something like that?
Not any elk. We've done a lot of deer and stuff like that. You got to be real careful. It's a really lean meat. So you got to be really careful that you don't overcook it. You overcook it, it's dry, tough shoe leather, right? So yeah, these rubs would be very good on venison. And I'm sure elk's probably a lot like deer. Maybe a little bit more fat in the meat because they're just such big animals, heavier. So maybe a little bit more fat, but I've never had elk. I've never cooked it, but I've cooked some deer. Back straps are real good on deer, and just, it's more moist. So be careful, depending on how long the cooking process is. Sometimes you can wrap it, get a nice color, get a good bark on the outside, and wrap it. So what it'll do is it'll speed up the cooking process, and it preserves and locks in the juice. So the longer it stays in heat, the more it's drying out. So even brisket, we'll smoke brisket for 4 hours and I'm wrapping it. And I kind of get a beautiful bark, I get beautiful color, got all the smoke in it that I need, and then it gets wrapped in tinfoil, and we put some beef broth in it. And then that'll power it through the stall. It'll come up to temperature in about another 3 hours, and you'll have the most amazing brisket ever. So, but yeah.
Thank you.
Somebody else asked the ideal grill temperature on the hot side versus cool side.
Okay, so to give you an example, I use a laser temp gun on my grill grates to put these diamond marks on. I've got a set of them back here. So these are the grill grates that I was talking about. They got little holes through them you can see through, and they got little rails. And I shoot a laser temp gun on the top of the rail. And when I'm cooking my steaks, they're at 550 degrees. So it's pretty hot. That is the temperature of the grate. Now, obviously the fire may be a little bit hotter underneath that. I'm sure it is, because you got heat coming up through that hole. But most of the time when you're cooking steaks, you want to be around 500 or 600 degrees. I know some of the competition guys are using pellet cookers. On pellet cookers, they're running the temps up to 550 degrees and cooking steaks on a pellet cooker as well. So yeah, I would think you probably want that temperature up around that 500 to 550 degree range.
And then what are the difference in results for Texas crutch with paper or foil wrap?
Okay, so I use full for the Texas crutch. Just like I was saying, we're going to smoke our brisket for 3 hours, 3 to 4. Usually it's 4 hours, and then we wrap it. You can wrap it in butcher paper, a peach paper, and it'll help it power through the stall, or you can wrap it in full. I always wrap in full. And the reason is because I have au jus. I don't have au jus when I wrap it in peach paper. So au jus is very, very important to have when you're slicing that brisket. A lot of people say, well, the bark is not as firm on full as opposed to peach paper. 100% true, but there's things that you can do. So when my brisket is in full, I wrap it, I let it rest in that full with that au jus that's cooked out of that brisket. I'll rest my brisket for an hour and a half or 2 hours. As soon as I open my full, if I get it to probe tender, the temperature that I'm looking for, you don't cook a brisket to a temperature. You cook a brisket till it's probe tender. You need to feel like you're sticking warm butter in the thickest part of that brisket. Never, ever cook a brisket to temperature, probe tender. Okay. When it comes off of my smoker, I immediately open up my full. I let the steam out. I stop the cooking process. I'll let it sit open for about 5 minutes, and then I wrap it up, except I leave my full up real high because I cook it in a big full size pan. And when I wrap it, I leave a little bitty slit about 1 inch wide and about the width of 2 nickels. Okay, so slightly over 1/8 inch. I leave a little slit at the top. That allows the steam to come out. So that brisket is hot, and it goes in an ice chest or a Cambro. And I want that brisket to stay hot for an hour and a half. When it comes out of the full, I take the brisket out and I put it back in the smoker for about 10 minutes. And by putting it back in the smoker at 275 degrees, I just dried up all that bark. I've got beautiful bark on the top of my brisket, and it firms it up just like I never even wrapped it. And then I've got this amazing au jus that came out of my brisket. So I'll put that in a fat separator. So I've got good clean au jus with no fat in it. And I'll slice my brisket. And every time you slice it, I'll lay one out. I'll baste it with that au jus that came out of that brisket. If you slice a brisket, just let it sit on the cutting board, in a matter of 2 minutes, it's unoxidized and it's dry as all get out. But if you keep that brisket together and slice it and put your au jus on it, and keep basting those brisket slices a couple times and keeping it together, that brisket will stay so moist, and it'll be like amazing. If I'm serving it to somebody, I'm going to cut it. I'm going to baste it with au jus, and I'm going to put it right on their plate, let them go eat it. And that's the best way to actually cook a brisket. All the competition cookers that we have, I've never seen nobody cook and do it with butcher paper. It's a difference. I've had guys that we cook against. They've tried it. They never walk. They always get beat by the guys that cook in full.
Do you prefer Traeger or green egg? And are there any cheaper options?
A big green egg is a different type cooker. That is a ceramic cooker. So it's more like a grill. A pellet cooker like a Traeger, that's a pellet cooker. So for convenience, Traegers, the pellet cookers are absolutely awesome. You push a button, it's a wood-fired convection oven. Cook it slow, like if you're cooking a brisket, You can take that brisket, put it on at 225, 230 degrees. You get a pretty good bit of smoke. Let that thing smoke for about 6 hours and 5 hours to 6 hours, and then wrap it. And then once you wrap it, you can crank the temperature up. At that point, you've got all the smoke. You're just trying to get it to tenderness. Take that thing and crank it up to about 275, 295 degrees and cook it till it gets pro tender. So there's a lot of people in competition now that are cooking on pellet cookers. They're getting the analytics figured out on these pellet cookers where they really start to produce a lot of smoke. They have got another pellet type cooker that just came out. The patent was just filed. It was just released about 2 weeks ago, and it actually burns wood chips. So it is a really cool deal. It doesn't burn a pellet, it burns a wood chip, a fine wood chip. It puts out even more smoke than a pellet cooker, but it cooks the same way as a pellet cooker. It just has more smoke. I can't remember the name of it. One of our cookers that's on Barbecue Champs, Sterling Smith, he is kind of the guy that's kind of helped this company get this deal going. He's done some testing with them, and he said he absolutely loves it. So I can't remember the name of it though. If you shoot me an email if you are interested in that particular cooker, I can get you the name of it. I don't even know if it's available yet. It may not be ready until the end of the year. But yeah, pellet cookers are just a lot easier. Big green eggs are great for, grilling stuff. I mean, they work good as a smoker. I mean, you can cook a brisket on a big green egg, put your diffuser plate in it, keep your temperature down. You don't want to cook that brisket on any kind of direct heat. But for convenience and nothing to mess up that's foolproof, it's hard to beat a pellet cooker.
Awesome. All right, we are at time. Our questions have slowed down in the chat. So thank you guys so much. We know that you guys get a lot of event requests. So thank you so much for spending the night with Extra Hop and Mike Steele of Barbecue Champs Academy. If you guys need anything, please let me know. Just as another reminder, your shipments are expected to be delivered in the second half of this week. So by Friday, if you do not receive that shipment, please reach out to me directly. But you should all have received it by Friday, the absolute latest. I will send a recording out, or the recording for this tomorrow, and a couple links to things that we talked about as well. So thanks again, everybody. And if you need anything, let us know.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Danielle, for letting me do another class for you. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. I hope you've learned a lot. And as I always like to close out these classes, go out there, build these memories with your family, friends, and loved ones. Have a lot of fun and smoke on.
Smoke on. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.